Welcome to Sacred Realms. It's a great day in Hyrule, y'all. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast. I am your host, Lyndon Willoughby, joined, as always, by my co-host, Matt Willoughby. Matt, how are you doing tonight? On this somewhat pleasant evening, I feel like in normal circumstances, we would look at an 85-degree night and be like, I don't know, that's kind of borderline, that's a little warm. But these weeks and weeks and weeks of extreme temperatures, I think, have desensitized us and caused us to adapt to things that no human should have to adapt to.
I mean, 85 degrees is a fairly pleasant temperature in my opinion, but so I'm very glad that we're here. We're outside again for the second week in a row.
You know, it's 85 and not humid. That's the thing.
That's true.
Yeah.
No, it's a beautiful night to record some pod in a courtyard surrounded by Christmas lights still, which I'm giving you the side eye on that one. At this point, you might as well just leave them up.
The colors make me happy.
Well, I'm glad that they make you happy, I guess.
This was an intentional choice. I just want to let that be known.
Okay.
At any point, I could have unplugged the Christmas lights and plugged the white ones back in, but I like them.
The colored ones do give a certain ambiance that white lacks, so that's fair, I guess.
Yeah, they have kind of an eyes wide shut look to them, which maybe not what we should be going for, and I know that went right over your head.
I was about to say, I don't think I've seen that one, so...
it's a film, Matt. It's a film. I don't know.
With a capital F? Is it a capital F film?
It is a capital F film from Stanley Kubrick himself.
Generally don't do the capital F films, except for Oppenheimer. That one was great. Also a capital F film.
Things I really have.
Have you still not seen it?
No, I haven't seen that or Barbie.
I actually really want to see Barbie, which I've also heard is subtly a capital F film.
Okay.
So
I like that when they kind of sneak it under the radar.
Yeah. No, I'm here for it.
People
Marilyn and I
I accidentally saw a film and I loved it.
Marilyn and I have plans to dress up as Barbie and Ken, me being the Ken in this situation, obviously.
Cool, yes.
To go see Barbie, and we just haven't manifested those into real life yet, and I'm very disappointed in us, but also we've been so super busy. But
you know what I somehow managed to manifest into being, Matt?
What did you manifest into being?
Having two Matt Willoughbys on this podcast tonight. It's crazy.
Did you clone me while I was in Colorado?
Here's the deal. You were gone, and I needed a Matt. And I searched far and wide, and what it turned out transpiring was that our good friend Josh of Zelda Universe was able to be molded into the form of Matt.
Oh, yes.
A brief period of time. So, Josh, I have a question for you. One, welcome back to the show. That's not a question. That's a statement. Two, the question, are you comfortable shedding your Matt persona? Because I really think there can only be one.
That's for sure. This is definitely Highlander rules.
Of course. Yeah, I've had a busy couple weeks. I had to be Matt, and then last week I found out I had a twin brother.
Your family situation has definitely been kind of rocky.
So, been all over the place, yeah.
It's like I have been a Willoughby and a Davies. All in the month of August, I think.
Well, but no one can blame you for that last one, because the thing is, y'all were separated shortly after birth while on the high seas. No one can expect you to retain those memories.
I know, right?
Oh, man. So famously, I don't listen to our own podcast, but I did actually listen to that episode, and I was laughing just as hard listening to it as I was when I was recording it. Maybe not just as hard, but close to. I was laughing just as hard as I would have been had I not been very tequila heavy that night. But anyway, that episode was awesome.
It was.
Yeah, I was driving through downtown listening to the episode, and it completely caught me off guard, and I about lost it.
We're glad that Mike's tomfoolery didn't result in you having a catastrophic car accident. That really would have ended the whole saga in a very unfortunate real life way. So Certainly glad that didn't happen. No, one of the all-time fun episodes of Sacred Realms Pod was last week, I think. Mike was in rare form that night.
He was really going for it. I mean, on top of the Cody and Josh sibling dynamic that he constructed in his own brains, he also sang us the Peaches song, except Zelda version, which was really funny.
I was back and forth in my mind about whether to take that out of the episode, and I was listening to it.
You can't take that out of the episode.
And like he was doing pretty good, but then it kind of trailed off, and like he had the lyrics pretty good, but then there was a few minutes where it devolved into like Peach or Zelda and Link and
Ganondorf, and I'm gonna break your spine.
And I was like, nope, that's it.
You just gotta leave it. You just gotta leave it.
Comedy gold. Maybe also a musical achievement. You know, who am I to judge? But art is subjective. But yeah, so great episode all around. Josh, are you gonna sing for us tonight? That's the question I have.
No.
Fair.
That's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Cool.
I will give you a good noise though.
Yep, there we go. That's a good one. And just so everyone knows, that's not a drop. That's not an audio drop when we do that. That's authentic. Straight from the recording experience. Josh, we are super glad to have you back on the episode tonight. It feels very appropriate to me to have you here because a little bit of information that you are not even privy to, Matt.
Oh, tell me.
Prior to the recording of this episode, just about an hour and a half ago, I sat down and played myself a little bit of Zelda 2.
Ah, good for you.
I did. I spent about 30-ish minutes playing the game from, North Castle and then beat Parappa Palace. So basically so what I said I was going to do was load in and just see how far I could get without rewinding.
Okay.
And that carried me through most of Parappa Palace until the point where you have like Hinox and Iron Knuckles and stuff starting to appear. And I took some unnecessary risks in my quest to kill some of those bubbles or some of the fairies to get XP, which I shouldn't have done because other stuff was hitting me while I was trying to do that, and it takes forever. But anyway, so all that is to say, my whole no rewind rule sort of fell apart a little bit, but nothing too terribly egregious, and I did beat that first palace. So taking a little trip down memory lane just to give myself some objective thought with regards to the whole Phantom Hourglass versus Zelda 2 discussion, which, we're obviously going to get into a lot more here in 2 weeks' time. So.
Yeah, last week's episode, I was listening to it again, and you kept saying, like, yeah, we're going to have you back a week after next. And I was like, no, we're like 3 episodes away from finishing the game. And you kept telling Mike that we were like, I think a week or 2 closer than we actually were to the rank and recap.
Oh, that's my bad. Yeah. That's my bad.
You had too many ranch waters, Lyndon. You got to keep an eye on that.
That's fair.
Now that you're getting up there in years.
But you know what I have to say about Zelda 2, though, Josh, is that I don't know that it's having any kind of great redemptive moment for me right now, but I do think it is kind of fun. I retained a lot more of the muscle memory of playing that game than I sort of thought that I would have. Like I kind of just clicked back into it. So that was nice. And then, of course, the other big thing that I immediately noticed, and I'm not going to compare the two things too much right now because we're going to have a whole segment about that later, as in a later episode. But one thing that I did immediately notice is that one place in which Zelda 2 is head and shoulders a clear winner above Phantom Hourglass is the soundtrack.
Such a good soundtrack overall. Yeah.
Yep. That was really fun.
I would say, generally speaking, I think Zelda 2 is better the second time you play it. Because I found the same thing, that you kind of retain some of what you learned. You kind of know how to fight the enemies. You have a little bit of idea what to expect. So the first time I finished it, I struggled through it. I did not have rewind. I had a 3DS with just save states. But I used them as if they were rewind, in front of every Iron Knuckle. And by the time I was done with it, I actually wanted to play it again. And I was pretty excited when I did sit down and play it again. And did it without any save states or rewind that time, just to play it, quote, for real.
Yeah. But, it does have me wondering if I might feel somewhat similar about Phantom Hourglass, like if I ever come back to it in the future. Because I really do think a lot of the uncomfortable experiences and stuff that I had in the early game, a lot of the things that were the most off-putting to me, yes, objectively, some of that stuff is not great, but also just the surprise of some of it, I think contributed a lot to some of those early, very negative feelings. And I'm not saying I think that this is the case, but I do wonder if knowing what you're getting into up front, going back into it, would kind of alleviate some of that a little bit. I'm not sure if I'm ever going to put myself in that situation, but just an idle thought.
Yeah, I think the hardest part about Phantom Hourglass is like I don't hate the stylus controls, right? But it is still sort of you can't exactly just relax on the couch and play it the same way as Zelda 2 or any other normal button controlled Zelda game. But more than that, it's all of the uncomfortable needing to yell at your DS, blowing on it. Closing it's not really hurting anyone or causing any conflict. It's just a confusing puzzle. But
yeah, I was gonna say after you figure it out,
never goes away.
After you figure it out the first time, yes, it is not hurting anyone.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just that stuff never goes away, and so it's just I don't jump back into it as frequently, just because it's a bit of a hassle.
Yeah,
that's fair. I will say, actually, you know what? I'm not going to say this. I'm going to save this till after we get into that section of the game, which is, I think, 3.
Fair enough. So. But here's the question I have for you before we get into housekeeping and actually kick off the episode, the main chunk of pod that we're here to do. Matt, do you have any intention of going back and playing a little slice of Zelda 2 before we record our rank and recap, just to get some objectivity around the comparisons? Because at this point, I feel like we've just been making so many of them. Like we're holding it at that level in our minds, and I think it might just be good.
Yeah, no, I definitely plan to. I think I'll probably play roughly the same amount that you did, like not terribly much, but definitely I'm going to revisit for a bit and dive back into that to just see how I feel about it on my second go around. Even though I think we said at the end of that season, we said that we probably would never play Zelda 2 again. Here we are, probably playing Zelda 2 again. You already have.
It hasn't even been a year. Yep.
So, promises made to be broken, et cetera, et cetera.
I just recently finished Zelda 2 a few weeks before Tears of the Kingdom came out.
How long does it take you, being much more familiar with it than we are, to truck through that game on average?
Roughly 6 hours.
Wow.
Which is and that's like going out of my way to get everything kind of right. I guess you kind of have to. I don't know why you'd ever play the game and not get all heart containers or whatever, when there's only like 4 to pick up. But no, it's a sort of, I have specifically practiced doing it in 6 hours for our charity marathon, since that's usually what we limit segments to, is 6 hours. I'm sure with a little more practice, I could slice more time off that. But and that's like without rewinding, I can do it in like 6
wow.
hours.
Well, that's impressive in and of itself. Yeah, good for you.
The fact that you can do it at all without rewinding is impressive.
There's really only a few parts of the game that where I feel like it's really annoying. You end up in those situations, like those rooms where you have to jump over like 5 lava pits, and the little flying heads are coming at you, and they don't spawn in until after you've already jumped. And then they knock you in the lava and you die. That's annoying, and a time where I would generally just hit rewind, but I don't usually need rewind just for fighting under ordinary circumstances.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. And I will say, there were, what I noticed was that getting back into, say, a fight with an iron knuckle, it was one of those things where I was still probably pretty clumsy at it by expert standards, but I was making a go of it, and I knew what to do, and I knew the right way to jump and where to hit and the timing of things. And it's one of those things where it seemed so impossibly hard the first time we did it. and it just is kind of not necessarily there for me anymore. But so anyway, that's a fun aside about Zelda 2, which I will have a lot more to talk about in regards to comparisons to Zelda 2 and Phantom Hourglass in a few weeks' time. That's going to be a very, very interesting conversation. I really can't wait to get into it. But for today, we are not here to talk about Zelda 2 any more than we already have, or at least until the next time we compare something in Phantom Hourglass to it in the Sacred Realms rundown. We are here, of course, to talk about Phantom Hourglass. A actually very interesting section of the game, I thought, which is appropriate, right? Because we're coming to the end of this game. This is the second to last main episode of this season before we get to the rank and recap. So we're in the end game, Tony. It's winding down, and so I think it's probably good that things are getting shaken up just a little bit. We will have lots to talk about in regards to that, but I'm going to go ahead, read off the housekeeping so that we can jump straight into the episode. If you didn't know, Sacred Realms is a weekly re-examination of The Legend of Zelda, one little slice at a time. Sacred Realms drops every Wednesday and is available on all major podcast networks. Every week, we play a new section of a Zelda game, and then we sit down here to talk and to drop our hot takes. If that sounds fun to you, please head over to Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to leave us a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated, and they have a chance to get a shout out here on the show. If you want more Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/sacredrealmspod. To get access to our Discord channel, listener mail, vote on what game we play next, and so much more. Additionally, one of the benefits that Master Sword patrons and above get is that we read their names every week here on the show. Those legendary individuals are Cosmic Link, Jerry, Dante 2, Tom, Gavin, Stephanie, Billy, Connor, Rachel, Shepherd Street, Matthew, Chris, Daniel, Fallout 907, Tiffany the Star, Daxel, Patrice, Stephanie, Il Maestro himself, Darknuck, Brian, Mike, Dylan, Allie, Lennon, Melanie, Kolku, Aiden, Rowan, Josh, Nick, Dante1, Gep, Brittany, Davey, Haru the Mighty, Derek, Albert, Mark, Andy, Cameron, Ben, Daniel, Nick D _TV, Travis, Hyrule Interviews, aka Max Nichols, Garrett, and Drew. These are the most legendary of individuals, and I would bring any of them with an excursion to an ancient ruined city anytime.
Absolutely. That sounds hella fun.
I think it does. You know what else sounds like a lot of fun, Matt?
Tell me.
Letting a 5-star review off the chain. Do you have anything for us in that department?
I do. From Anya Dodo, who says, I don't even really like Zelda that much, but it has 5 stars.
Interesting start.
It is a very interesting start.
I have questions, but go on.
I got into Sacred Realms as I was getting into Breath of the Wild a few months ago, but something weird happened when I finished the Breath of the Wild season. I just kept listening. I've never played another Zelda game or even had any interest in Zelda before, but for some reason, listening to Matt and Lyndon has become such a comfort to me. I'm across the country from home right now, and when I started not feeling good, I found myself immediately reaching for this podcast. I don't know how it happened, but Sacred Realms is a safe space for me. Well, Anya, I really am glad to hear that. I hope that you still are enjoying this place that we've just kind of created with our voices and our nerdiness, and very gratified to hear that that's the case for you. And for anybody else out there, I hope that this is a fun thing for you to be doing, even if you don't play the Zelda games. You know, we're always happy to have you, happy to have our community, and thankful for each and every one of you that download and listen every week.
Absolutely. And you know what? To this person, I would say, love that you're here despite having not a whole lot of familiarity with the Zelda series. Having played Breath of the Wild, if you're looking for something fun to do, I would suggest maybe loading up the remaster of Link's Awakening. As a good example, maybe, pick one of the older Zelda games or a top down, something that's a little different from Breath of the Wild, and jump into that and just see if you develop a taste for it, because those are great experiences too, and I highly recommend that people give them a shot if you never have before, and it'll give you a little bit more context if you choose to go back into the older reaches of the show and listen from that point. So that's just a little suggestion on my end of things, but excellent 5-star review. Of course, Matt, we got another 5-star review this week, which is a beautiful continuance of one of the oldest in-jokes of Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast. So why don't you pull that one up for us real quick?
This gets we're doing a double 5-star shout out? Wow.
The circumstances are extraordinary, but
that is true.
Yeah.
Well, from you, George. Yo, George. It's Yo, George, not you, George. I came here for the robust political discussion. I stayed for the Zelda commentary that they sprinkle in from time to time.
So really, we're hitting two big podcast in-jokes right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from there is the entirety of the Texas Roadhouse menu copy and pasted into Apple reviews, which is truly all the way back to the OG. I think that was like season 3. It's still it makes me laugh every time I see it.
This is excellent friend of the pod behavior, and we really appreciate you. Was it Yo George?
It was Yo George.
Okay, Yo George, you're a legend, and we stand legends on this podcast.
We do indeed.
The robust political discussion freaking killed me.
Which, yeah, we'll just go with it. Let's do it.
TIE Fighter. TIE Fighters, they just get in the way of the flow of the pod. What you gonna do? So to those 2 5-star reviews, much appreciated. As always, we very much appreciate 5-star reviews, and we've had kind of an influx lately, which makes us feel very thankful, and we appreciate that very much.
It feels great. Thank you guys. And by you guys, that is gender neutral term. We appreciate each and every one of you, like I said, who download and listen every week. We're here mostly to amuse ourselves and for our own entertainment, but we appreciate that so many of you join us on this journey.
Yep, absolutely. We do have one additional bit of housekeeping that we need to get into real quick before we jump into the Sacred Realms rundown. That is, of course, the thing that we find ourselves needing to talk about as we approach the close of any game that we're playing, which is the topic of what are we playing next? And as we do on this show, we will be opening up a poll this week on our Patreon where we allow our patrons to vote on the next title that we will be playing. We're moving next to another 3D installment of the Zelda series after having done back-to-back top-downs. The voting choices will be between the only 2 remaining that we have, which aren't Tears of the Kingdom, which is Majora's Mask, one of our all-time favorites, and Twilight Princess, one of the frequent sources of our skepticism on this show, which neither of us have actually tested in years, so it might be completely unfounded.
I literally don't think I've played Twilight Princess since I was in high school.
It's been a very long time, so we could have been giving Twilight Princess a bad rap this whole time we've been doing pod. But either way, you, our patrons, will be able to vote very soon on which of those we're going to go with. We've had some back and forth discussion in recent weeks, Matt, on the Discord mostly, about whether or not we wanted to just say hey, no poll this time. Let's just do Majora's Mask first, given that there are just so many more ways for people to play it right now. On an N64, on the Master Collection from the GameCube, on the 3DS, on the Nintendo Switch online service, as opposed to Twilight Princess, which is unfortunately unavailable right now. And we keep this happy thought in the back of our minds that Nintendo's going to drop that HD version on the Switch along with Wind Waker at some point. But, much like the Metroid Prime trilogy remaster that people just swore up and down was coming next week for years, it has just never materialized. So, I think it's probably better just to do this thing in our classic format, let the community cast their vote, and we will be beholden to whatever they decide.
Absolutely agree. Let's do it.
All right. And that poll should be going up when, Matt?
That'll go up this week. So you'll be listening to this on Wednesday, the 16th. So it'll be up by Friday, the 18th.
Awesome. Get in there and cast your votes. Can't wait to see how it pans out. But that's enough housekeeping for now. Let's get into the Sacred Realms Rundown, which is a 6-part analysis of what we played this week and the feelings that it made us feel. Today we are covering Phantom Hourglass Chapter 7, dealing mostly with Muto's Temple, the Isle of the Dead, the Isle of Ruins, and the northeastern section of the Great Sea in general. Part 1 of the Sacred Realms Rundown is, as always, the plot recap, this week read by Matt. Take it away, Matt.
We leave our genocidal Anuki acquaintances, and we make note of the one quadrant of the open sea that is still shrouded in mystery in the northeast. We head back to the Temple of the Ocean King to dive into its obnoxious depths for our last ocean map. Using the handy-dandy checkpoint, we head to the start of our lower portion of the temple. We make our way back through the same traps and phantoms for what feels like the millionth time until we arrive at the lowest point that we have reached. There, we place the 3 crystals on their pedestals in the order that the tablet has told us, and we feel the entire temple shift and shake. We exit to find the layout of the floor to be completely changed and a new set of challenges set before us. New types of phantoms appear that can teleport when alerted to our presence. But even with all the added security and new challenges, we pass into the final room and claim the last sea chart for ourselves. With the northeastern sea now open to us, we set sail on the ocean once more. We decide to do some sightseeing and visit some of our favorite games on the way. We even head to an oddly shaped island in the southeastern sea where our Goron buddy, Gongaron, helps us win a game and get a large bombchu bag. All in all, our side adventures net us some neat ship parts, some useful gear, and enough rupees to stuff our bag full, as long as we don't tell Linebeck about it. Once we tire of side quests, we head to the northeast to find our third and final pure metal. As soon as we enter the area, we see 2 islands surrounded on all sides by rock barriers. The island on the western side of the quadrant is not only blocked off by a rock barrier, but also a huge cyclone swirls at the entrance to the Ring of Stones, making the island effectively unreachable. So, we head to the easternmost island instead, which is smaller and is shaped like a person wearing a crown. Once we dock, we find a few structures of notice that draw our attention immediately. There appears to be a large pyramid in the top right corner, and the top left is occupied by a graveyard. The only path forward is through a tunnel, and within we find a series of books that contain notes from a previous explorer of this island. The explorer says that he is sure this island contains the secret of something called the Cobble Kingdom, and he appears to be very excited about that. The thing that catches our eye in these books is the mention of aquanine, our third metal that we need for our sword. The rest of the books talk about the Cobble Kingdom and how it was once a glorious city that surpassed all others. It was ruled by a king and his 4 knights until, seemingly overnight, the entire civilization vanished. We head through the tunnel and onto the rest of the island, and here we find an island that is deserted of life, except for that of monsters. Like-likes and reanimated skeletons called Stalfos abound, and try to stop us from progressing to find the secrets of the Cobble Kingdom. We head directly to the pyramid on the island and find a clue within about a sacred tree and a hidden path to the resting place of the 6 sages. A second tablet in this pyramid tells us that we will not be able to proceed forward without the knowledge that these sages possessed. So, we follow the clues on the first tablet and find the underground passage that leads to the graveyard. There we find another clue that tells us to look west from the King's Eye and shoot an arrow. We head through the tunnel that is for some reason filled with rolling boulders and find ourselves on a raised section of the island. We follow the instructions from the hint and shoot a nearby switch to open the door to the island's cemetery. Once there, we inspect the gravestone and find instructions for navigating the pyramid's secret passageways. Following the guides from the sages' tombs, we eventually reach the center of the pyramid and find an ornate sarcophagus resting there. As we approach the tomb, a ghostly spirit rises and declares itself to be Brant, the 4th knight of the Cobble Kingdom. He questions why we have the 3 spirits of the Ocean King with us, and we quickly relate the story of our adventures to him. He laments the fate of the Ocean King and agrees to help us in any way he can, in repayment for the protection that the Ocean King showed the Cobble Kingdom at the height of their power. He says that their king, Muto, has the aquanine with him in his burial chamber, and that to reach it we must travel to the Isle of Ruin, past the great cyclone that protects the island. He opens the way for us at the back of his pyramid to the regal necklace, which has the power to calm the cyclone and allow us passage to the ancient home of the Cobble Kingdom. With the necklace securely around our own neck, we leave the Isle of the Dead and head to the Isle of Ruin. True to the word of the night, the regal medallion calms the huge cyclone, and we pass into the heart of the Cobble Kingdom. This place is an island of ancient glory long past, yet it still holds the dignity of a kingdom of great power and prestige. The island is so obviously influenced by far-reaching architecture that even Linebeck comments on it as soon as we step off the boat. This island seems to be equally natural formation and man-made architecture combined. The island has 3 pyramids of various sizes on it. On the southwest, a large maze-like group of pathways stick out of the water. We head that direction, following the words of Brant, to seek out the third knight, Brimure, in that pyramid. This island is infested with even more Lyclikes than Stalfos, and the Lyclikes in particular hamper us greatly as we make our way across the maze toward the western pyramid. The real pièce de résistance are the Zora warriors that block our way as we explore the island. But eventually, we make our way to the Pyramid of Brimure, and he tells us that we need to seek the King's Key in order to break the seal that was placed on the land when the Cobble Kingdom fell. He confirms that the Aquanine is indeed within King Muto's temple, but that his resting place has been infested with a monstrous presence, and that this monster must be dealt with before the Aquanine can be given to us for our sword. He sends us thence to the second knight, Doylan, so that we can acquire the key and unseal the land. Brimure appears to have opened a path for us to the eastern side of the island, and we head that way with haste, dodging past some weird-looking mini-blins and more Stalfos. The Temple of Doylan is hazardous, mostly with more rolling boulders for some reason, and some arrow traps. But eventually we make our way to the sarcophagus and receive the King's Key. We head back to Brimure's tomb and use the key on the obelisk there to unseal the land and cause the flooding waters to recede. In his final act as a ghost, Brimure tells us to take the new path that was uncovered and seek the final knight, Max. We head off to explore the newly revealed section of the island and find our way to the first knight for what we hope is the final key or clue to the Aquanine. After moving some large boulders out of the way and crushing some others, we finally make it to Max's pyramid. Max's resting place holds no obstacles, but he does send us to the newly revealed maze to find the sacred symbol that we need to open the door to Muto's pyramid. So off we head back to the maze, where we find more tablets that, when read in the correct order, tell us how to draw the sacred symbol. So we head to the door that seals the way to Muto's temple, draw the bookmark symbol that we sketched from following the tablets, and the door opens to reveal the way to the final pyramid of the island. Finally, inside Muto's temple, we find a truly gigantic pyramid full of traps and puzzles. This pyramid is the final resting place of the king of a powerful empire, and it rings with the trappings of that honor. After using some cleverly programmed bomb chews to open the path forward, we find ourselves diving down into larger segments of the pyramid. We fight some upgraded Stalfos and then head back up to the first floor and then up further to the second, where we avoid some unkillable turtle enemies and then move on into another maze filled with Lyclikes and finally find another staircase that leads up to the very top of the pyramid. There we fight a couple of Stalfos and, you guessed it, another fucking Lyclike. But after defeating these flimsy foes, we get the hammer, which can be used by our fairy friends to smash things at a distance and do serious damage to enemies and traps alike. We head back down with our new toy in hand and use it to smash the rusted switch into opening the door to the temple main area. As we make our way through the rest of the temple, the puzzles are mainly related to new uses for our hammer. We have catapults that can throw us and large boulders onto nearby ledges. There are also tiles on the floor that can be changed from blue X's to red O's and vice versa by smacking the ground with our hammer. And most fun of all, we discovered that the Stalfos can't stand up to a single smack from our fearsome fairy-wielded weapon. The Temple of Muto is long and filled with these varieties of puzzles and more, but eventually we find the boss key and make our way to the bowels of this tomb to confront the monster that infests this place and keeps us from the Aquanine. We enter the boss room to find a 2-story tall stone edifice in the shape of a man. The gigantic automaton jumps into battle, fists slamming and arrows shooting from its head. The room is circular and scattered around are catapults, which throw us high into the air. We get so high in the air, in fact, that we have ample opportunity for our fairy friends to use the hammer on the stone soldier's various weak points. As they do, the stone begins to fracture and fall away, revealing the metal skeleton beneath. Eventually, we destroy all the stone and find a few crystals beneath that stone that look vulnerable to some hearty smacks from our hammer. Finally, the stone soldier crumbles, but alas, is not felled completely. Its head begins to hop around the arena, shooting giant arrows at us. But the head is slow, and the catapults easily get us on top of its vulnerable noggin, and the powered crystal there is soon shattered by our bloodthirsty fairies and their fearsome hammer. As with all the great bosses before it, the stone soldier explodes in a shower of sand for our Phantom Hourglass, and rewards us with a heart container. We take these treasures and head down to the final resting place of King Muto. The man appears, just as his knights did, as a ghost above his sarcophagus. The king listens to our tale about the plight of the Ocean King, and does indeed award us with the Aquanine that his people kept safe for so long. He bids us farewell and good luck before returning to his eternal blissful slumber. We now have all the pure metals we need to construct the magical sword to defeat Bellum. So we leave this grand pyramid and set our sights back to Zalza's forge, where we can combine these treasures and forge a sword worthy of legend.
All right, well done as always, Matt. That brings us to part 2, which is our takes, where we talk about this section of the game and how it made us feel. So real quick, Josh, I'm going to bounce it over to you. You and I caught up not all that long ago, but we've played a little bit of game between here and there, and we have a big old chunk to deal with this week. How do you feel about unlocking this new area of the Great Sea, all these things that we get up to this week?
I mean, I don't really care for the unlocking it part.
As has become our custom, yes.
It's really not as bad as I say. The additional floors in the Temple of the Ocean King are really rather simple compared to the ones before it, which is another great case for just getting this out of the way the first time you do it. So that you can do those really annoying bits one time less. But otherwise, I kind of go back and forth on this because I kind of remember really liking this part of the game, and I still thought that it was neat. But it does feel a little bit just sort of fetch questy. It's very much you got here, but sorry, the princess is in another castle, and you do that like 4 times.
Yeah, that's fair. At least you're kind of given some heads up before you get into all this that, yes, but like if you're reading the diaries and everything that are in that cave, it's like, oh, there are, 4 knights of renown that were part of this kingdom or whatever. And of course, when it says 4 knights, that's like highlighted in red, So it's like, okay, there's no way I'm going to have to go find all 4 of these guys or anything. But I definitely agree with you. I think things can feel just a little bit more linear in execution than it sort of like if you were to write down on a piece of paper, like these are the things that you do in this order in this section of the game. the actual execution of those things can feel a little bit more perfunctory than it might sound like it's going to be just reading it off a list. But it's definitely kind of a shakeup to the formula of the game and the things we've been doing between dungeons at this point, which is kind of nice. I want to talk about the Temple of the Ocean King real quick because we do have further additions to it now. And, notably, we do have to go back to it this week after taking a week off, which was very nice for all of us, I think. Matt, do you feel like, so Josh, to Josh's point, it is not necessarily ramping up in complexity the way that we might be expecting it to. Is that causing you to feel more or less into the experience at this point in the game?
As far as Temple of the Ocean King? Yeah, specifically, I still just am over Temple of the Ocean King. I never want to go back there ever again. I just look, the golden phantoms were fine. The new puzzles and mechanics were fine. This is now the 5th or 6th time we've done it, and I'm just bored of it. I don't want to do it anymore. I think I understand the concept of what Nintendo was going for by having Temple of the Ocean King and by revisiting it over and over and over again. Well, you get to do new things with your new items, which means you get to have a faster time. I don't care. After 6 times, I don't care. So yeah, I'm over it.
Yeah, I think one of the things, because you make a very interesting point, Josh, and it's got me thinking about maybe what was the rationale for having a lower grade of difficulty as you get further into this. TIE Fighter.
When we recorded outside with Mike, we didn't actually have any.
That night we didn't. No. And it's been so long before that since we recorded out here that TIE Fighters have not been like a part of our episode process much. But yeah, here we are. They're back. There we go. And kind of where I'm at with it is I think what's happening here is that the design team, instead of more complex puzzles in the lower floors of the Temple of the Ocean King, start trying to introduce what they maybe saw as being more difficult enemies, right? Like you've got to ramp up from the blue phantoms. Last time we were here, we had the red phantoms, and now we have gold ones. And I know on paper they are slightly more difficult versions of the same enemy, right? Like they have increased radiuses of detection, or they move quicker, or they can warp to you, or whatever. And I understand that might sound like it creates a more difficult experience, but I really don't feel like having to deal with any of these phantoms is appreciably too much different than the very first ones that we were fighting. Like maybe every now and again I can tell like, oh, you aggroed on me just a bit quicker than the blue guys do. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, it doesn't actually lend itself to, being a more difficult experience in any measurable way. I mean, do you kind of agree with that, Josh? Do you think it's maybe a bit of a miss if that was the goal?
Yes, I agree entirely. I really don't think that I really just don't think they add an additional challenge. The most annoying enemy in the entire thing are the little eyeballs that just summon things. The rest of the enemies don't really matter.
Yeah.
It's really just get into a room.
Yeah, I absolutely hate those.
Make sure you try and kill the little eyeballs as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And, the whiz robes that do pop up and steal time off of you, those are actually a little bit of an extra level of challenge. And I guess I do have to give that a bit of a shout out.
Spin attacks.
The thing is, yeah, spin attacks for the win there, absolutely. But the thing is that the price for not taking one of those out immediately is that you're just losing time. And so all that's doing is adding to the frustration of this whole experience, right? Where you're having to manage that clock. And yeah, I don't know. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the temple anymore because I think we're all on a level about it, and the experience hasn't changed to any major degree since we stepped into it for the first time. And I think at this point in the game we can safely say it's just not our thing, and I would be very curious to know whose kind of thing it is.
So I have 2 things. I actually have an answer to that question that's kind of a little anecdote. I would say I did make a note though that I did find some extra shortcuts this time. Like there were like, I don't know if you've noticed this, you can actually use the grappling hook to pull the wall levers from a distance. Maybe you have to do that in one of the dungeons. I did that in the Temple of the Ocean King just to save myself the walking. And so I did that a little bit. The biggest problem I encountered is that I would notice the shortcuts too late. Like there's a shortcut I could have used a bomb chew for. Didn't notice it until I'd already done it. I was like, oh, I could have just saved myself like 30 seconds by doing it that way. And I'm just like, and I don't even know if I did it the next time I came in here. It's like, I'm so focused on just get this over with that I don't think twice about trying new items or whatever. I just tried the solution that's in front of me.
And it's like if you were to go and actually take that, like once you realized it, if you were just to go do it, you'd be then sacrificing like 20-ish seconds of your time. Right. And it's just not worth it.
And for that matter, like I'm not redoing the first part, right? There's more shortcuts to take on the first portion. But once I get that shortcut, I am never visiting the beginning ever again. Like, unless my time is like abysmally bad. But I did it in like 3.5 minutes, and I was like, and I did some treasure hunting, found some sand at the bottom of the ocean and such. I had like 20 minutes or something to play with, so I'm just like, I'm not worried about it. Just go.
It must be so nice to be finding Phantom Hourglass sand in those ocean salvage treasure chests.
I think I have found like 2 or 3 minutes.
I did
extra.
Great. I did like 4 of those salvage mini games this week, and every single one was a ship part, and none of them were ship parts that I even thought looked good. So
probably ship
like
parts you
I
already
think
had.
that I wish that I could tell you, but like the extent to which I'm paying attention to that is 0. Yeah. And so if I could have 3 duplicates and it wouldn't have even procced for me. Like I wouldn't have even noticed.
So yeah, short anecdote about who actually finds this fun. The answer is Bill Trinan. So several years ago now, I don't know what made me remember this week. Zelda Universe posted just like on Twitter, what's the most underrated Zelda game? And we got a response from Bill saying Phantom Hourglass. And when we pressed him on it, he talked about the Temple of the Ocean King and how it was like playing an arcade game and trying to get better at it the more you played it. So apparently he thought it was great.
What is his title with Nintendo?
Director of English. I don't actually know.
Okay,
like he used to be in charge of localization. I believe was like very directly responsible for localization in early Zelda and Nintendo games. Like Dan Osen was the localization person for the first Zelda, at least, and maybe A Link to the Past as well. But I mean, Bill Trinan's name's in the credits of like every Nintendo game made since 1990 or something.
He's one of those names that, being a person who follows a lot of Nintendo adjacent accounts on social media, I see his name crop up a lot. And I want to say that I've heard him as a guest on stuff like the official Nintendo Power podcast at certain times, and so his name is definitely one you see flying around, but I've never known exactly what he does. But that's still, hey, that's really cool. That's cool engagement from like an official Nintendo.
Initially, what he was known for was just being Miyamoto's translator. In early stuff, that was basically what you saw him doing. You can find like old clips of E3 in the late 90s, or like the announcement of Smash Bros. Melee is a good one. Where it's like Miyamoto and Bill Trinan on stage because Bill Trinan is translating for the announcements.
What a job! What a job to have! You have to filter the words of Shigeru Miyamoto to other languages.
It's like I think he still does that. Whether that's like his, it seems a little bit like he should have moved on from that, but it may just be a sort of they've been working together for 20 years and. That they just do that, but no, he's just kind of been around forever.
He's the Aaron to Shigeru Miyamoto's Moses, Matt. He's the mouthpiece.
Good for him. That's a good job to have.
Little biblical comparison, little Sunday school moment. Okay, cool. So, good for Bill Trinan. I would venture an opinion that he's maybe a little biased on the subject. Regardless, I will take that opinion for what it's worth and as being completely valid. So I'm glad somebody at least is enjoying it. What I'm very curious to know about, and don't spoil any of this for us, Josh, because I've been wondering about it, and I'll find out next week. I know that the next section, like the end of the game, is basically going back into the Temple of the Ocean King and coming through it and fighting Bellum at the very end. And in my mind, I've been kind of trying to figure out, is like, okay, does that just mean going back through the entire thing one more time and then you come through a different door and now there's Bellum? Or are we getting like a new final section of what we would consider to be like an end of game dungeon after all of that? And we'll find out. That's something that I am really hoping is, there's some new stuff that's been tacked onto this, but my hopes are not super high for that. So we'll see what goes on there next week. Moving on from the Temple of the Ocean King, we visit some really interesting areas in the northeastern part of the sea. And I think one of the things, especially in the early game, that was really causing me to not be enamored with this world was the fact that it was all pretty samey, right? It all just felt like islands on the Great Sea. It all felt very tropical, very, been there, done that. But over the last few weeks, especially starting last week with the Frost Island, and this week moving essentially to a pair of islands that serve as crypts of an ancient civilization. Really some interesting stuff going on there. How'd you feel about that, Matt?
Yeah, I really liked this section of game. I think that on top of just the what is this? Is this Ruin Island the first one, or it's Isle of the Dead?
Isle of the Dead. So, most people, I think, probably try going to the Isle of Ruins first, and then you get cycloned out of there, and then you have to go to the Isle of the Dead.
Oh, see, I didn't even try to go to Isle of the Dead first. I saw the cyclone on the map, and I was like, cool, guess I'm not going there.
Vice versa.
No.
You didn't try going to the Isle of Ruins first, which is where the cyclone is.
Yeah. Right, yeah. Thank you. I didn't go there because I saw the cyclone, and I was like, cool, I'm just going to go the other place. I thought both of these were really cool islands, and also I got up to some other shenanigans, which I'll talk about in Bloopy Trail, which I also enjoyed. I liked the feel of these places, kind of like as Zelda's analogy to Atlantis or something. Felt fun, and I think they did a decent job. I think this probably would have been done better in Wind Waker or Ocarina of Time, or a game that wasn't Phantom Hourglass, as far as from a ambiance vibe perspective. Probably would have been done better elsewhere. But on the low bar that Phantom Hourglass has set for vibe and ambiance, I thought this was well done, and I really enjoyed it. I think that the pyramids are unique. You don't really see pyramids. I can't think of another Zelda game that pyramids are in.
Well, I played a dungeon in Tears of the Kingdom.
I can think of one. Yes, I can think of one. Our newest game. Yes, other than Tears of the Kingdom.
At least 3 off the top of my head.
Oh, yeah. At least 2 that you've played, Matt. So you've got the Pyramid of Power. Literally, it's in the name. From
Link to the Past. Okay. And then Tears of the Kingdom. And then what else, Josh?
So the Pyramid and the Desert make an appearance as a major location in Four Swords Adventures.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
So, very rare occurrence. How about that? Or was everybody acceptable?
That'll do.
Very rare occurrence to have an architecture of this type. And like inside the ruins feels Mayan-y and just different. I think the islands themselves could have done more to lean into that vibe and aesthetic. But again, we are playing Phantom Hourglass. It's not the most aesthetic, vibey game that we've ever played. So just take it for what it is. Anyway, I thought it was good. I really like it. I thought this section of game was very good.
Yeah. How do you feel about the vibe and ambiance and just kind of the immersion of this location, Josh?
Oh, yeah. No, it's great. Like I like desert stuff in general. For whatever reason, Zelda games are really good at desert dungeons.
Totally
they're really good at desert and sand themed. Everything is always great. I mean, just off the top of my head, like the sand temple or whatever in A Link Between Worlds is great. The one in Tears of the Kingdom is very good. The one in Twilight Princess is very good, which I know we haven't got to yet. Even the one more or less sand one in like Majora's Mask is really good. For whatever reason, it's just I feel like everyone likes the sand dungeons, and I agree. I also like any of the graveyard kind of stuff, and we don't have a lot of that here, but there is a graveyard. And ghosts and such. So yeah, I think it's all excellent.
That is an interesting point, Josh, because I totally agree with you that for some reason desert/sand dungeons in Zelda seem to just like hit, I'll say 90% of the time just to be safe, but I can't think of one that doesn't hit hard and isn't one of the better ones in the game that it takes place in, right? Like Spirit Temple and Ocarina of Time is probably my second or first favorite temple.
The Desert Palace and A Link to the... Yeah, I was going to say, but that's the immediate first one that came to my mind. Desert Palace and A Link to the Past is not that great.
Oh, I think you're right. So like, but one out of
the very first desert dungeon they ever
10
made.
that we've played.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right.
like one out of 10-ish that we've played. Like, yeah, they're generally speaking all very good. And as far as I know, Japan doesn't have any deserts in it. But anyway, like they always do really well, and I think that's very interesting phenomenon and kind of carried forward.
Yeah, I think it's fun how one of the things like. There can be things that are pretty regular in the Zelda series and then some that are less so. One thing that I think is present in almost every Zelda game that I can think of is a graveyard setting. Mm-hmm. I feel like most every Zelda game has a graveyard.
Is there one in Legend of Zelda?
Yep. Yeah. Sword there.
It's over...
Yeah, that's right. Because you have to go. It's like the Lost Woods version, but in the graveyard. Yeah. Then in Adventure of Link, it's the super dangerous place. You have to have the cross to go into.
Yeah. Yep. So, a fun revisit of that kind of location. It feels very Zelda to have it incorporated here and to have it tied into the solving of a puzzle. So I really did enjoy that. I loved the pyramids too. It was one of those things where when I got to the Isle of the Dead and saw the one pyramid all the way up there, I was like, oh, neat. I hope that's something fun that I can enjoy before I leave this island to go do something else. And it wasn't such of a much, but then you get to the Isle of Ruins and it's like, oh, hey, there's like 5 more. Yay. And it never really wore thin for me. And similar to you, Matt, I think your comparison to Atlantis is a really interesting one. And to that point, I really love the whole having to lower the water mechanic that happens here to where you uncover more of the island. I wasn't expecting that, and I thought that it was a really fun use of just giving you essentially double the space within a play space. Mm-hmm. I thought it was really well done, and there were some, honestly, as perfunctory as some of these puzzles sort of felt, the process of getting to the Temple of Muto, I think it's greater than the sum of its parts is where it ends up for me. Taken as a thing altogether, it really is a fun for me. That was about a half hour of game. But the thing that I thought was the most interesting was that we have some reprises of a few Link's Awakening puzzles that take place here. We've got a very Windfish's Egg feeling section in one of the crypts where you have to get the directions and go through and again, that's not specific to Windfish's Egg, right? Like Zelda games have been doing that forever. Lost Woods, all kinds of stuff. But then you go over to the puzzle where you have to follow the tombstones from one to the next in order to get the outline of the shape you have to draw on the door. And that to me felt very similar to the puzzle you have to do to get the Frog Song of Soul in Link's Awakening.
Yeah. Okay.
Where it's like you find a sign and it's like, go here. Then you find another sign and it says, go here, So that was, again, how fun is it in and of itself? Probably not much, but it did tickle a fun little nostalgia bone for me. And I'll take those, I give points for that kind of thing around here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that all of the puzzles were good at worst. if that makes any sense. Like, I don't think they've dipped below good in any way, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm kind of over the puzzle of mark the thing on your DS map and then draw the line between them to reveal the thing. So like when you had to go to the maze on the Isle of Ruin in order to draw the sacred symbol, which looked like a bookmark. It looked like a bookmark on the door. Like,
it's sacred, Matt. It's so sacred.
Like,
you don't even know how sacred it is.
Like, it took me 2 tombstones before I realized what it was making me do, and then it took me 1 more, and I was like, oh, I know where all of these are now. And so I just went boom, because I accidentally found the middle one first, and it was like, I'm number 4, and then I found the first 2, and it was like, oh. So just boom, boom, down the line, up to the middle, down to the other corner, and then up the line again. I didn't even go find all of them. That's just because I was like, oh, I get it. So I don't know. I'm kind of over that one. I think to Mike's point last week, he said like they lean a little too much into the drawing aspect of the game or the marking things on your map aspect of the game. And I kind of agree with that. I think it was used very well in the directions for the Isle of the Dead. I thought that was kind of fun. I did mark them on my map. It was
yeah, so
up, right up. Yeah. So I thought that was neat. I think it was good. This, and I think I texted you this, Lyndon. I'm going to go ahead and put this here just because I want to. I think this week combined with last week have put this game in a better spot for me than it was. And I think just 2 back-to-back sections that were very good from a dungeon perspective and from an overworld perspective. And look, I just have to excise the Temple of the Ocean King out of my memory completely for both of these sections. But once I do that, once I excise...
Were it so easy.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Arbiter. I really do think these last 2 dungeons were excellent and have elevated this game in a way that the rest of it so far hadn't been able to elevate it above the tedium and the control scheme and the Ocean King and the blah, blah, blah. But like, I think these 2 dungeons and just sections in general did a lot to help me out there.
I felt very similar. I think introducing new-ish experiences in new feeling places goes a long way towards creating goodwill when you're playing a game. And that really has been one of the things that Phantom Hourglass has not done well, especially in the early parts. But as you mentioned, Matt, stock is rising over the last few weeks. And, it seems like we're actually kind of coming to a point where it's settling into being a much better experience than it was early on. Josh, how about you? We talked when you were on a few weeks ago about the fact that, yes, this is at kind of pretty close to the bottom of your ranking at the moment. But, you're doing this playthrough on hardware that is a little bit more intrinsically fun to play the game on. It's the DS versus the Wii U. And now we've just had another pretty fun little area to explore with some pretty fun new things to do. Are you kind of aligned with Matt's thinking in terms of you're actually kind of coming to a more favorable place with this at this point?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I actually have at this point finished the game. But for sure. I left it at a sort of better spot than when I last played on the Wii U. I agree that I would even say as far back as like starting at the Goron Island, the game just picks up and becomes significantly better. And maybe that's the hardest part about it is like it feels really mean that the game just throws you into the Temple of the Ocean King like at the very beginning. and it just like makes the game come to a complete halt and you don't want to play it at all. And it, even when you've played it multiple times, like this is only the 4th time I've played it, but every time you play, you have to readjust to the controls. Because even though we have now we have modern smartphone games and there's plenty of things similar to Zelda that where you can like play a little top-down adventure game with your fingers, but the touchscreen technology is much better than the DS's touchscreen. You play with your finger, not with a stylus. And so nothing feels like Phantom Hourglass. It's like Phantom Hourglass was the prototype for a more modern top-down phone game. And so it just takes time to get adjusted, and you get frustrated and don't want to play it anymore before you get to the good part. But I think that I would say these 3 dungeons, the Goron dungeon, the Ice dungeon, and the Temple of Muto, is by far the highlight of the game. And it helps that technically in that time you only have to go to the Temple of the Ocean King. I'm saying once, starting at the moment you get to the Goron Temple. You only have to do it one other time. And it's kind of the easiest time because you get to skip most of it.
It is so interesting because you're right. There are a lot of modern games on modern devices with touchscreens where mechanics like these are kind of leveraged in a bit more of a fun way. And it really does make a whole lot of difference that all of those are taking place on like multi-touch capacitive screens, right? As opposed to the DS, which is much more of like Palm Pilot.
Yeah, and like remember that technology didn't exist when this game came out, or it barely existed, right? The first iPhone came out the same year this game was released. And that was the first time we really had that, at least in a consumer device, where you had a multi-touch screen.
I wonder if the ubiquity of multi-touch devices in everybody's everyday lives now is one of the things that has made this feel so clunky to us, Matt, especially having never played these games before, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if we're kind of grading against it just a little bit because, you know, like we spend all day, every day doing things more fluidly with very similar feeling devices that obviously are running on more advanced, you know, hardware and have more advanced capabilities.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, I don't know that I have too much to add there. I think you really summarized that very well. Well done. I very rarely don't yes and you, but I don't feel like I can yes and you here. So well done.
Got it in one. Making good points left and right, or at least left right now. We'll see if I get another good point before the end of the episode. One can hope. Do we have anything else that we want to say about this section of the game generally before we move into talking about the temple? Because I do think we covered most of it, but if anyone has anything.
I wanted to talk about the actual Cobble Kingdom for a second. We just kind of alluded to it being like Atlantis, which is sure, it's like Atlantis. The Zelda series has a few of these lost kingdoms. I'm not sure why there are so many, but no, I think it's an interesting little piece. I kind of wish we got to know more about them. However, there are some hidden bits that don't come up if you don't dig for them. Or if you don't know other references to other Zelda games. So the Four Knights and Muto, maybe the thing most people would notice. Muto is a carpenter in lots of Zelda games. This is specifically a reference to Muto. And the other 4 are his carpenters, or named very similarly to his carpenters, specifically in the Minish Cap. So in Ocarina of Time, they have different names, but in the Minish Cap, they are the same-ish names. We also had in
Ocarina of Time, it's Gyro and Shiro and stuff like that.
One of these is named Max.
So I noticed that immediately. Okay. Yeah, I just thought it was so freaking funny because Max was in the Discord last week, just being like, "I've never been to Muto's temple, but it's a proper name." And in my head, this is just like some dude's temple where he like set up shop, and it's just his man cave. And I thought it was hysterical because that's not really what happens, but you do visit a place that is specifically called Max's Temple in this section of the game. So Max, I don't know if your temple really lived up to everything that you thought it could be or should be, but there you go. Max's temple. It is canonically a location in Zelda.
The other part about the cobble that is not clear unless you dig around a little bit is that they still exist. We had a brief discussion on the Discord where I said I would mention this. Zauz is heavily implied to be a descendant of the Cobble, which is why he knows of the Ocean King, knows how to defeat Bellum. It never outright says it, but heavily implied and generally considered to be the truth.
So when Matt and I were theorizing about what Zauz was a few weeks ago, and you came in there just long enough to tell us that we were wrong, and you would let us know why.
Yeah. So Astrid, the fortune teller, and Ko, who died at the very beginning, are also Cobble. That is confirmed. They specifically tell you if you ever bother to go back and talk to them, which no one does.
That's very interesting.
So are you supposed to believe that they're just like an incredibly long-lived civilization and these people are the last survivors?
I mean, the game says they're descendants of, so maybe they just got all mixed in with the Hylians and they just have Cobble blood or whatever and ended up with some knowledge that the others didn't have, that Hylians don't usually have. But
gotcha.
But yeah, okay. It's just technically some pieces of their civilization are still around.
Cool. Very happy to know that. That deepening of the lore is definitely fun. And yeah, I mean, like you said, how often are people going to actually take the time to realize that? Probably not all that often, but that attention to detail is appreciated. Like I do respect that that's in there.
But yeah, I do wish we got more of them, or that they would show up in another Zelda game. But that is not happening.
I mean, that's kind of how we feel about the Zonai too, right?
Yeah, but they at least kind of got two.
That's how you feel.
Kind of.
I mean,
so far.
Semi.
Yeah, it's just like the Zelda series likes to say, oh, there was an ancient civilization, they did this thing, and then you never find out anything about them. Or they get mentioned once, and then you never hear more. Like even the Sheikah, right? When the Sheikah were established in Ocarina of Time, it was a long time before we really got anything else about them. It was like, well, there's this one in Twilight Princess and one in Skyward Sword, but you don't. It's just, oh, they protect royalty. That's what you get. And it took like almost 20 years for them to finally turn it into something else.
I do think that anytime a Zelda game feels like it needs an otherworldly location, it does kind of lean on this, right? Like I'm thinking of the Temple of the Sky in Twilight Princess, right? Where it's like, oh, hey, far above Hyrule, you've got this vast complex of like ancient skybound temples that this ancient civilization used to live in. And, you know, in this game, they were like crazy bird people and not at all anything relating to the other sky civilization that was in Skyward Sword or in Minish Cap or in Tears of the Kingdom or whatever, right. You know.
They're all very disparate for some reason, and no one can quite figure out why. Right.
No biggie, right? Doesn't need any explaining. Yeah. So, hey, there we go. We have yet another grand tradition of the Zelda series upheld in this section of the game. Let's move on into part 3, which is the dungeon map, where we talk about this week's dungeon from mechanics to music and more. This week's dungeon is Muto's Temple. And as we have made a point to do recently, we're going to continue the tradition of explaining what this dungeon is like before we dive into our discussion. So this dungeon takes place inside one of the giant ziggurats that litters the surface of the Isle of Ruin. It is essentially a crypt for the dead king of the Cobble, Muto. It is a multi-floor temple, labyrinthine in its arrangement. You're mostly opening doors that lead from one labyrinthine corridor to another. It does have a water raising and lowering mechanic as the surface does outside the temple. The item that we acquire in the temple is the hammer. The boss is, what is the name of this boss? It's
Eox.
It's the giant stone soldier Eox. Basically, the whole fiction of this temple is that you're inside the funeral or not the funeral. You're inside the crypt of the deceased king Muto, and the entire environment of the temple does a really good job at kind of bearing that out. In terms of enemies, we have Stalfos, which we haven't really seen in this game before now. We have several variety of Stalfos that we have to fight. Puzzles involve mostly raising and lowering the water, but also using the hammer to activate launch plates that can move us between different heights within rooms of the temple. It's just a very, really a very linear temple in practice that does have a lot of puzzle mechanics associated with it. Not super combat heavy, but just a little bit of everything kind of going on. Matt, I'm going to pass it to you first. You said specifically that you felt like this temple was a very strong one. Mm-hmm. Give us your thoughts about it.
Yeah, so I like your word labyrinthine. Yeah, labyrinthine. Good word, number one. Props to your vocabulary. Secondarily, I genuinely really like dungeons that feel this way, that feel like mazes that you have to figure out how to navigate. I think it's one of the reasons I was so attracted to the labyrinths in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, is those were some of my favorite experiences in the entire game. I really, really like them. It's another reason I like the Spirit Temple so much and the Forest Temple so much. Like, all of those temples and dungeons have kind of the same factor of feeling like a maze that you solve, and that as you solve it, it changes in subtle ways to allow easier passage through and around and blah, blah, blah. I thought that this was good. It's very enemy light. There's I think you have 2 encounters with Stalfos, and that's basically the entirety of your enemy encounters. And for the fact that I don't generally enjoy combat in Phantom Hourglass, I think that that's probably a good thing. And on top of that, I thought some of the puzzles that it gave you were well designed, and the hammer item, excellent. And the way that you use it in this game is really cool. The fact that the fairies use it on your behalf and you can hit people with it from basically across the entire screen. So cool. The little man catapults that you can use, really great. Using those to move a rock from one level to another so that you can crush another rock. Really cool extrapolation on that mechanic. I even liked the flip the tiles with the hammer game. I find those puzzles kind of fun. There's one of those puzzles in Knights of the Old Republic, which was a lot of fun. So it made me immediately think of that. I was like, oh, I remember doing this in KOTOR when I had to solve the puzzle and to open up a cool chest. So it was a cool little light that went off in my brain.
Yeah, sequential binary pattern puzzles like that tend to actually be very effective as actual brain teasers. Mm-hmm. And I do enjoy them for that reason. And so, just to explain what we're talking about for anyone who hasn't played, these are puzzles where you walk up to basically a 3x3 grid on the floor, and it's split between blue and red symbols, and you'll get a prompt from a nearby tablet or something that says you need to make all of these red, or you need to make all of these blue. And so what you have to do is you have to hit the grid with the hammer in order to flip the tiles. But the thing is that the hammer is usually flipping several tiles at the same time. So you have to place your hammer strikes very specifically so that you're only flipping the tiles that you want to flip in order to make them all the color that they need to be. And I agree with you that those are typically pretty fun puzzles, and I did enjoy them as well. Josh, I have a question for you. How much does sense of place in a dungeon matter to you when you're in one of these?
Probably not as much as other people might say. I do just sort of, and it's funny because I kind of forgot about the whole theme of this temple up front. I kind of have a soft spot for pyramids. I like the real pyramids. I like pyramids in video games. So the vibe of this one and it being a pyramid in particular just appeals to just what I like. But overall, it's not a huge issue to me. And I would say that sometimes those puzzles, like the little brain teaser block puzzles, they feel a bit fake, where a lot of Zelda games nowadays at least, try to make things feel a little more real. like it would serve some purpose. And you're just trying to traverse a real place, and this is very much not that. But no, it's just it doesn't bother me that really if it doesn't feel like anything. I'm there for the puzzles.
So to me, I would definitely not say that it's the primary concern for me. And it's kind of a continuation of a point that I've been making over the last few weeks, which is that these dungeons in this game have been pretty uniformly excellent. The one thing that I always kind of come back to as a point of criticism with them is that from a layout standpoint, they kind of feel a little scattershot, right? Like they do feel just a little video gamey. Like, okay, we have these puzzles and we just need to arrange all these rooms in a sequence that leverages those puzzles, and gets you from one area of the temple to the next. Whereas some other Zelda games tend to have their dungeons laid out in at least a format that is somewhat trying to maintain the appearance of being a functional space, right? Like the Spirit Temple in Ocarina of Time. When you look at it on a map, it's sticking very much to kind of what the layout of the temple sort of looks like from the outside, which is like a centralized location with like branches off on either side, and it's all built around that central statue, and that's just one example. And so I have been missing that in this game. One of the reasons I really liked this temple is because you saw the entire shape of the structure from the outside, right? It's a pyramid. And then when you get in the inside, that structure is kind of like borne out in the layout of the temple, to the point where even like the floors get smaller and smaller as you ascend further up into the pyramid, right? As you get like further towards the peak. So that was fun for me. It's, like I said, not the most important thing in the world, but it is one extra little thing that does add something to the experience for me. But did you feel pretty similar, Matt?
Yeah, I always enjoy when you enter a temple and it feels like you've entered the temple that you saw on the outside. I think the Spirit Temple was a really good example of this. You see the external edifice, and then you enter it and you're like, I can see how this functionally works. And this is automatically that. And as you go down, so like you enter on the ground floor, it has a pyramid structure, but then you go into the basements and it's like an expanding pyramid structure as you go down. I thought that was really cool. Sense of place, I agree with you, Lyndon, is like, it's a really good add-on. It's not the most important thing. If it's not there, I miss it, but it doesn't kill the whole experience for me. So having this dungeon lean into that in a positive way was just a W for it in the W column.
Yeah, totally agree. We talked briefly about the hammer a second ago, and like I said a second ago, dungeons been a high point for this entire game. Another high point has been the items and their execution. And I have to say that when I got to the chest, and especially like a few rooms before the chest, when I started to kind of figure out like, oh, I think this is going to be the item. Because you start seeing switches that you can't push down just by standing on them. And you see those turtle monsters walking around, right? Mm-hmm. And so pretty immediately I was thinking like, okay, this is going to be the hammer dungeon. And my expectations were pretty low. Because, look, hammers...
You genuinely hate the hammer.
Hammers in Zelda games are just not great. They are not great.
In your opinion.
Do you disagree? Like,
I like the hammer in A Link Between Worlds a lot. I used that instead of the tornado rod for a long time.
I question your taste. Josh,
the tornado rod ended up being better. Look, the tornado rod ended up being better and I converted, but I don't think the hammer, other than maybe the Megaton hammer, are bad. And even the Megaton hammer, like the first time I remember this very vividly, the first time I ever beat Ganon in Ocarina of Time, when you lose the Master Sword during that fight, I didn't have the big Goron sword because I was never able to complete the frog part of that quest, getting it back to the guy without it spoiling. I had to use the Megaton hammer on Ganon's tail. So I don't hate the hammers. I think they're like a C tier item, but they're not like an F tier item.
Josh, am I on crazy pills right now? Are hammers in Zelda games actually good?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't say they were good. I just said they're not as bad as you're making them out to be.
So there are hammers in several Zelda games. I was trying to look up an actual list, and this is actually not calling, like I'm seeing it's missing at least one hammer on this list. So I'm like, But I'm going to say like roughly half the Zelda series has a hammer. They are mostly functionally the same. Maybe with, I'm going to bring up Zelda 2. Zelda 2's hammer is invisible and you only use it on the overworld, right? That hammer doesn't count. Usually you get a thing like it. They put it in A Link to the Past as a way to make you punch pegs or to flip over a turtle. And they have rarely ever changed. That is basically what they do. I think the one in A Link Between Worlds is used to push down switches, and I don't use it for combat. I would never not use it for combat ever. This is easily the best hammer in the entire Zelda series.
Easily. Yeah, so that was the point that I was definitely trying to arrive at, and I really don't think that there's much of a competition. The whole premise of my line of questioning here is just the fact that like I was very unenthused to get this item. Like I was thinking to myself, oh, this is the point where our unbroken streak of excellent freaking items comes to an end, right? And then we get it. And look, is it as cool as the grapple? Probably not. But look, you can spam this thing and it does damage.
It's so like, cool.
It's actually a little unfair to enemies just generally how good this hammer is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah, so,
no, Josh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I actually forgot how it worked. Like, I knew there was a hammer, and I was similarly just not really looking forward to it. For a while, I was, like, just, like, revealing some of the background here. Like, I mostly chose this episode initially because I was like, I'm busy with Tears of the Kingdom. I need as much time as possible to be in a mindset to play this game, so I'll just pick the last one. I was starting to think, like, man, I wish I had picked the Hook dungeon. Because the hook is so cool, and I knew it was cool. I just didn't remember which dungeon it came from. And so once I realized it was the hammer and that it was going to be the end, I was also just not very excited about it. And then I immediately used it and remembered all there was about it. But it's such an outlier in the Zelda series for being a cool hammer that I even forget it exists. But no, like I just really, really like this item.
Yeah, so originally when I started using it, I was like, how is this hammer going so far away from my body? I don't understand. And then it was actually on the area where you're going down the long moving block where you have to smash all the skeletons on either side. And that's when I saw that it was actually the fairies, all three of them, that were using it on your behalf. And like I laughed out loud because I thought that was so freaking cool. Like the fairies are racking up a body count, and that made me smile.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is the moment where Ciella's like apparent murderous impulses really come out to play, right? Like Ciella was ready to murder kill all the Yuke, and you know what? We did that, and now she's like, that was fun, but also, what if I could do the murder?
What
if I could destroy their bones?
Yeah,
also?
Just pulverize them into dust with one hit. Oh my gosh, it was really great. I loved it.
So I don't know that this is ever required in the game, but did any of you by chance happen to just hold the hammer and not swing it for a while?
I did, just to see what would happen.
I did not.
I didn't use it on anybody in particular, but I did just for fun.
I don't know how useful it actually is because you have to hold it for so long, and it's probably better to just spam it all over the screen. But the hammer will actually like get twice as big if you just hold down and charge it.
It has a charge attack?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
But yeah, I don't know if it's actually useful. I don't know what happens if you hit the block puzzles with a charge attack.
Oh, yeah. Because all you need to do to flip all of them at one time is just hit it in the middle. I'm wondering, is the hammer any good against the shielded Zora swordsman? Like, can you use it to fight those guys more effectively? I'm not even sure if you see any after you get it for the rest of the game. But
I don't recall. Like, I tried to use the hook on them to see if I could like steal their shields, and that did not work. But but no, I'm not sure. One thing I do know it does on those block puzzles, did any of you realize you don't actually have to hit the blocks?
No. Oh, well, yeah.
If you hit like
outside
the left or right of the outside the square, it will flip just the adjacent squares.
Yeah,
so I just need to hit a corner block. You can do that.
Yeah, I used that a lot on the corner blocks specifically.
Yep, so did I. Yeah. So good. I'm going to go try the charge attack, basically, is the immediate first thing I'm going to do when I get back into the game. But can we render a judgment here, Matt, now that we've gotten all the key items of Phantom Hourglass, aside from the Phantom Sword? Does this game have the best and most useful overall suite of items in any Zelda game we've played so far?
I think so. I think the way that they interact with the world, the way that they interact with the stylus controls, the way that they are used, and the way that you solve puzzles with them, like all of the above is just like so unique and universally good. Like there's not a wasted item in this game. Most of the time, I feel like at least one or two of the items in a game are just like you use them for the one dungeon that you get them in and then never touch them again. Megaton Hammer. But like not here, at least so far. Like I can see myself using the hammer on enemies just for fun because it's really cool. Like I don't necessarily think I'll need it a lot, especially this is a problem with all items you get from the last dungeon in the game, right? That's a universal problem.
Fire rod, etc.
Yeah. So like that is definitely still there, but super fun, super cool, very well designed, very well utilized. Yeah.
What do you think, Josh? Do you think that this is unquestionably the strongest suite of key items in a Zelda game?
I would not say unquestionably. I do agree that they're all because you use them with the touchscreen, they feel really unique. I have been, every time I play this, I think about like, could they do this again without the touchscreen? And it's like some of them for sure, yes. Like this hammer, I don't see a great reason you can't just have a fairy carry the hammer and use a cursor to, or whatever, especially with a more complex control scheme like you have in Tears of the Kingdom. I feel like there's no reason it couldn't work like Magnesis, basically, or Ultra Hand, and you just choose how far away you want to hit. But like the grappling hook, I think you could do, but it might be a little wonky, maybe. Like the boomerang's the big one that just doesn't work. There are boomerangs in the series you can control. I don't know if you all have played any of the games that have them, but not where you can just spam all over the screen and do whatever you want. It is a much more limited controlled boomerang.
Yeah. I think another item in that same vein as the boomerang that is so unique and well suited to the touch screen is the bomb chews.
Yeah, for sure.
And I used them used them in this dungeon specifically to hit the switches at the very first entry level when you have to hit the switch and then run across the bridge. I got as far away like as close to the bridge as I could, dropped a bomb chew and drove it around the map to hit the switch. And I was right next to the bridge more or less and walked across. It was awesome.
Yeah, I did the same thing. And I actually, so a very fun thing that I did to solve this puzzle. So the one that you have to activate on the left-hand side, which you have to be a little bit, like you have more ground to cover once you activate the switch. What I did in that circumstance was I tried doing it once or twice, moving the bomb chew just in basically a straight line towards the switch, and that was it was just too tight, like the moving platforms weren't lining up, and I kept finding myself just like, a few steps away from getting over the bridge before it collapsed. And so what I ended up doing was using the bomb chew, but just kind of driving it around, like I would let it go, like I would draw a path and then make it do like a few figure eights or whatever, and then go hit the switch. So I basically was able to double the amount of buffer that I had to get up to that bridge, which was really awesome. And that was one of those moments that I think is so fun when the Zelda series does this right, where I knew how the item works. It's not that I discovered any additional functionality about the bomb chews in that moment. I just found a way to kind of game the system a bit. And that's really satisfying, right? Like that makes you as a player feel smart and powerful, but you figure out ways to do that.
One thing that always sticks with me from one of our earliest conversations with Max is Zelda puzzles are most successful when they make the player feel smart, and puzzles in games in general. And this dungeon in particular made me feel smart, and it made me feel good about the way that I solved the puzzles, and it made me feel like I knew what I was doing in this game in a way that most of the other dungeons haven't really done as successfully outside of the Ice Palace. And this was, I thought it was good top to bottom from that perspective.
Yeah, I did that same thing with the bomb shoe. And it's one of those things that makes you feel like you broke the puzzle. Even if it was maybe just the intended way to do it. But without a Breath of the Wild mindset of just trying weird things, it's hard to get out of this very strict puzzle solving mindset. Like thinking about where this game places in history, it was released a year after Twilight Princess, which is probably the best example in the entire series of a Zelda game where you get items and then never use them again. So it very much feels like the items do one thing and that's all they do. And if you've just played that and then you play this, you won't be thinking about using the bomb shoe in a weird way like that, right? So I do think that it's interesting that they gave you that ability to just have that freedom.
Yeah. Matt, did you find yourself a little disappointed that this dungeon didn't give you any opportunities to use the grapple hook in any unique ways like in the Ice Palace? Because I feel like, especially given the fact that there are some areas where we're moving between like levels within a floor, you know, and across chasms and whatnot. I'm not saying like, obviously I'm not expecting the dungeon to revolve around that mechanic because the grapple is not the item that we get in this dungeon. So it's unfair to expect that of it. But I do think that there were opportunities to leverage that. Like we use other items in here, you know, we have to use the bow and we have to use the boomerang. We got to use the bomb shoes, you know? So
yeah, I wouldn't say that I was disappointed by it because I think that the way they utilized the hammer was not equally unique, but close to equally unique. And same utility, right? Moving between levels, specifically with the catapults. So I wouldn't say I was disappointed, but I did notice that it wasn't utilized at all in the entire dungeon. I think I mostly just came away being glad that I wasn't using only the hammer and the bow and the bombs, because like bow and bombs and boomerang to a certain extent are just staples of every Zelda dungeon that I can like think of. Not every single one, obviously, because you don't have them for every single one, but like those are the three items that you utilize all the time, or two items I should say. No, three, because I said boomerang, bombs, and bow. So those three items are just like so utilized that they're your core puzzle solving mechanics in Zelda in general. So I'm glad that I was using bomb shoes, for instance. Like, never use bomb shoes. I hate bomb shoes, except for in this game. They're wonderful. So, I would say I noticed it, but wasn't necessarily disappointed.
Cool. Yeah, fair enough. I don't know that I have too much to add about that, other than to say that I do think just generally, this game does a pretty good job at making you leverage several of your items within dungeons after you get them. And I think that that's a good thing. I think that just goes even more into showing the depth of utility that the key items in this game have, which is nice. Does anybody have anything else they want to say about the temple before we move on to the boss?
I was just I'll have a little more to say about the hook later, but I was gonna say, like, it makes me wonder if by chance, like, those two dungeons were like designed simultaneously or something, since there's absolutely no overlap. I do think maybe the biggest missed opportunity in this game is that you get the grappling hook so late, because it is, I think it's the best of the items, especially with the like catapulting mechanics, which are severely underutilized. And I think there's a lot of cool things you could do with it if you had another chance to do more with it. But since it's so close to the end of the game, it feels like you just don't get that chance.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And again, to Matt's earlier point about the late Zelda game, especially, well, I was going to say especially for top downs, but I think this is actually probably true of most all Zelda games. You do come to a point where the world is shrinking and your opportunities to do new things are kind of limited, which I think is one of the reasons that people enjoy Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom so much, right? Because with the exception of like crossing things off your to-do list, those worlds stay pretty interactable the entire time through the game. I mean, you could feasibly just spend forever in them. So, but it is an inherent, I guess, drawback or an inherent quality, to use a neutral term, in most all Zelda games previous to that point. And this one is no exception. So I definitely agree with you, Josh and Matt. Let's move on to talk about the boss of this dungeon, which is Eox. Mm-hmm. Okay. The giant stone monster. And I want to say up front, I'm going to pass it to you, Josh, first to talk about this. But before you do, I just want to make one small observation. Going into this boss room, I was thinking that 100%, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this boss was going to be a giant turtle. And I thought that for a few reasons, right? Because like one, you see the little turtle babies in the dungeon, and that's a thing that Zelda does a lot, right? Where it's like, oh, you go through a dungeon and you're fighting the little baby versions of the boss, and then you get to the actual boss and it's just like a bigger, scarier one, you know? So I was thinking that for that reason, but also it's just like, okay, I've got the hammer, bet you anything I have to hit the ground and turn the turtle upside down and then do damage to it that way, right? Just would have made sense. I don't know. And so because the boss wasn't that at all, I was very pleasantly surprised. But moving it to you, Josh, how do you feel about Eox?
I like this fight. However, I was a little bit surprised by it because I was mixing it up with a different fight. I thought I was going into a boss fight that I would know what it was. And apparently I was mixing it up with a boss from Spirit Tracks. So I was a little bit surprised at what it was. But no, I like the fight. I think it's fine. Like, I really don't think it's that special. I think it gives you a neat chance to just spam the hammer. But it's a bit of a... There's just not much to it, right? You just do the same thing over and over. Unless y'all found some secret special attack it does or something. But all it did to me is it shot some arrows at me and I launched myself up and smacked it with the hammer a bunch. So I think it's fine. I don't think it's a highlight particularly of the bosses in this game. I like that it's not a giant turtle.
Yeah, I think my thoughts are somewhat similar, Josh. And maybe, obviously, since you've played this game before, you kind of knew what to do going in. I will say I spent a solid... I used... I actually had to use a purple potion before I figured out how to even damage this dude. Like, I was trying to figure out how to have him hit the catapults for me for some reason. I was trying to like break his arm when he slammed it down. I was trying to do all sorts of things. I didn't know for the longest time that you could use the hammer in midair after you got launched. So I was just like launching myself and floating a very long time in midair. And I was like, why am I doing this? I don't understand. And so I think it was a little obtuse, to use our O word, which we actually haven't used in a long time.
Wow.
We haven't used that like all season.
Hey, you got to put that as a point in Phantom Hourglass's favor. It didn't give us an excuse to bring out obtuse before this point.
That's true. So I felt like that was a little obtuse.
Closing the DS is not obtuse.
I think we did use obtuse in that instance. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we did.
God, you're right. Okay, never mind.
So twice. Look, we'll say we've used it twice.
Point retracted.
Anyway, so it took me a while to figure out what I needed to do, because this is the first time you can use an item while in midair that I can think of besides Zelda 2's downward thrust. So, there's that. Other than that, I feel similarly to Josh. Like once I figured it out, it was just, all right, avoid attacks, go to another catapult, hit the weak points. Then you get into the second phase where it's just the bouncing head, and it was, all right, how do I get on top of the head? And then just spam the hammer on top of its blue gem. And fine overall. Like I think of the bosses that we've played against in this game, this is probably the weakest, which really, in my opinion, kind of speaks to how pretty excellent most of the other ones have been, or at least good plus to great to excellent, right? So yeah, that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I agree with all.
I actually forgot about that last phase.
Oh yeah, does it change your opinion at all?
No, not really. I just forgot about it. I was like, oh yeah, it was just kind of over so quickly.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I agree with all those points that both of you are making. I do think this is another cool execution of the dual screen system. Mechanically, it's not as interesting as some of the other things that we've done, but just from a sense of scale, it is really fun because you do get the feeling that you have this immense boss that's like towering over you.
Huge.
Which is really great. It gives this boss kind of a Galactus-esque feel, even though the fight doesn't necessarily go too much like that. It has a similar quality, I guess, just in theme. I do like the feeling of being in an immense cavern that you have just because the camera is done this way. It makes it feel like a very classic Zelda boss chamber, which is fun. And I do think that there is something to be said for that. It can be a little tedious at times, right? The process of like having to get around behind the boss, especially to hit some of the pegs that are poking out of the back of it. It's one of those things where it's like you figure out pretty quickly how you need to do it, but just the process of like waiting for an opportunity to open up slows everything down a little bit. And that can be not the most fun player experience. I agree with you, Matt. I think that it's definitely not a highlight of boss fights in this game, but I think in and of itself, it is fun enough. It definitely wasn't grating to me. Like I didn't have a bad time doing this.
Sure. Yeah, I wouldn't say I had a bad time either. And to your point about the Galactus comparison, I think when I came into this fight, I was thinking too much along the lines of, Galactus, which is why I was trying to like use his arm against him or something. I was trying to see if I could break off his fist, put it on a catapult, and then use the catapult to throw his fist back at him. And obviously that is not how that works.
You were thinking about it too hard, Matt.
I was overthinking it. So, agree.
Cool. That does bring us to the end of the dungeon. Does anybody else have any additional points they want to make about Muto's temple before we move on to other things?
Muto seems like a really chill dude.
I was
cool. Yeah, sure. Why not?
That's true. I was going to say on the boss, I was actually kind of looking up things about it as we were going. Apparently, this is a Cody one. He would go in and tell you different language things, right? In Japan, it has the same name as a boss from the Minish Cap, who we call Mazal. And I know y'all haven't played that one yet. But the interesting point there is that they're not monsters. They're guardians that protect, in this case is protecting Muto's tomb. In that case is protecting the Fortress of Winds, which is also a Lost Civilizations little hideout. So it's maybe an interesting throwback that we didn't get the full experience.
That's also an interesting almost contradiction to what we're told by the knights, who say that we have to go cleanse Muto's temple of the monster that's inhabited it so that we could get the Aquanine. So curious about that particular tidbit.
Yeah, and it is funny because I think that the explanation that you just gave for us, Josh, of the potential like fictional backstory of this enemy is it does seem like that would make the most sense, but it definitely doesn't line up with something that maybe Bellum would be leveraging against this temple, right? I guess it's possible that this is something that was left in the temple by the civilization that conquered the Cobble, which we don't really know much about it. Like, do we know what was supposed to have destroyed the Cobble civilization?
I think it was a natural disaster.
I don't think we do. Oh, well,
it sounded like,
been flooded.
yeah, I think it was a natural disaster that destroyed their civilization.
Climate change, cool. So, yeah.
Wow. There's our politics again, Lyndon. You're letting it creep into the pod too much. Come on.
My bad. We're getting another 1-star review coming our way. So it's kind of tough to speculate too much more about this without knowing a little bit more of that backstory. But I do agree with you, Matt, that there's like a weird dissonance between the story that we're given and the way that it's actually kind of played out here. Mm-hmm. How much does that matter? I don't know. But worth mentioning maybe.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. And then my final note is that we've talked about getting to use the item in midair. This is one of the only times in the game where I actually like to use the bumpers as shortcuts for items. I actually kind of like just having the very slow-paced combat sort of tap on the icon to use it. So I don't use the button shortcuts hardly ever. Doing this fight without the button shortcut is kind of a nightmare. Because you really need to, you only got those few seconds in the air.
Yeah. I will say that I have been using the bumpers for item equip basically since I learned that was a thing you could do, and I found it to be definitely kind of a net positive for that whole system. So I don't know if I completely agree that the game is better without that. Obviously, that's just down to personal taste. I like speeding things up a little bit, but I can definitely see where it would be a huge pain in the butt to try and not use those in this fight. And, earlier in the game, we were kind of talking about how it wasn't very clearly explained that was a thing that you could do at all with the bumpers. And I am wondering how many people get to this fight and just have a really terrible time with it because they don't know that you could do that. And they're trying to juggle the tapping to equip and then tapping to do damage and all of those things together.
I mean, this was still the era of instruction manuals. So games were not as diligent about teaching you how to do every little thing. So I definitely just had the manual and had flipped through it to find the buttons.
Instruction manual? What's that? Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those discussions around maybe it doesn't feel super fair in game, but the argument can be made well, if you had just read the instruction manual that we packed in the box for you, then you would have kind of known. And, is that good game design? I think anybody, coming from a modern sensibility would tell you probably not, but definitely a different era when things were handled a little bit differently. So it is important to keep in mind.
It's just limited space on cartridges in a lot of cases.
Yeah. So there you go. But yeah, a good thing to keep in mind for sure. Let's move on from part 3. Let's get into part 4, which is Bloopy Trails, where we talk about interesting things that diverted our attention this week. Josh, I'm going to pass it to you first. Did you do anything fun that was not directly related?
I have a lot. So when I played this on the Wii U, I was very much ready to get it over with. And pretty much just main quested my way through the game. So this time I made a strong point to go do the extra things. Not all of them, but to do a bunch of extra things. So I already knew that the grappling hook existed. I knew exactly which things it could be used on. So from the very beginning of the game, I was marking my map every time I saw a peg for it. So I went sailing everywhere again to hunt down all of the little treasure chests that I had missed. A lot of them were just money. Sometimes it was some kind of power gem or wisdom gem or whatever. But yeah, so I spent quite a bit of time doing that. And then playing mini games. I went to DS Island, which was a bit confusing because the mini game was not opened. And I never figured out how to open it. So I didn't play that one. I played the digging game and lost 100 rupees. And which was just awful. That game is very bad. But then the other thing I tried was fishing, which I had never done, I don't think, or not in a very long time. I did the whole side quest this week. I had not done the fishing side quest, and then I went and tried fishing and immediately was just horrible at it. I managed to catch 2 fish, but they were the same fish. And I do not think that is a particularly fun mini game.
That's the worst, right? Where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
2 identical fish. I feel like I'm getting nowhere. It's not good.
Yeah, so I did that. I went hunting for more little frogs to teleport around, which is very helpful. And then upgraded my bomb chew bag and my quiver with all of the money from selling all of the ship parts I don't want. So yeah, I probably went around the map twice for various things. The other big thing that maybe got mentioned a little prematurely last week is the trading sequence, which I forgot about until I heard the episode. But you actually can't do until you have the Northeastern Sea chart, which is an odd decision. You made a point, Lyndon, a bit ago, that a lot of these games feel like they run out of things to do at the end of the game. And that made me kind of change my mind and think, well, maybe they intentionally made this not available till the end of the game so that you'd have something to do. But it still just feels odd. So the trading sequence, did either of you do it?
No, I have not started it yet.
No.
So it's what the traveler ships are for.
Gotcha. I've been visiting them and just have found them to be kind of like quirky, little fun personality snippets, like meeting different characters. But it's nice to know that they're for something a little bit more structured than that.
Yeah, and like I had actually written on my sea chart because one of the guys mentions wanting a notebook that he had lost. And so I had written on the sea chart, need to find a notebook. But until you go to the Northeastern Sea and visit the traveler ship there, you can't start the sequence. And it feels like it would have been a better design to start the sequence in the Southwestern Sea, and then as you opened new sea charts, get the next part to do.
Sure.
Instead, I got to the end of the game, got the first part, and then basically just teleported around to each of the boats to finish it out. And so, like, it's fine, and the reward is neat, but you get it so late in the game you get it very late in the game, and I would not say it's particularly practical for anything. It's just a cute addition. But it was neat to go do, and you do get a few more little character moments. I met a man that calls himself the Man of Smiles.
That sounds like a terrifying person.
That dude creeped me out. I met him too, and I got very like serial killer vibes from him.
So you didn't get an item from him?
I did, and it didn't help with the serial killer vibes, to be honest.
Okay.
Well, now I want to know what the item was.
That's the beginning of the trading sequence. He gives you the new hero's clothes, which is a reference to the Wind Waker. When you play on New Game Plus, and you get to stay in your pajamas the whole game. In that game, when Grandma gives you the hero's clothes, they are invisible. And Link still acts like he's holding them into the air, but there's nothing there. And the same thing happens here. You get the new hero's clothes, and it's an invisible pair of clothes, which then begins the trading sequence.
Yeah, so my interpretation of that was he gave you nothing and expected you to put on the nothing. And I was like, oh boy, this is weird. I'm not enjoying this.
So I was following a guide that apparently I actually wrote and forgot I wrote. So I was following a guide for it because I just wanted to see the trading sequence so we could talk about it and and so that I could say I did it. And it was a little disappointing coming off of like Link's Awakening, I would say is still like the great trading sequence. Ocarina of Time is great too. And there are more of them you all haven't gotten to yet. But it's pretty disappointing when you have these other islands and these other characters you've met, but the entire thing is just traveler ship to traveler ship to traveler ship. With basically nothing else to it. The reward is fine, but I kind of wish that they had a little more of like, you actually go maybe Astrid wants an item, and you go back to Astrid and talk to her for something, or you go back to the island with the guy who runs the archery game. Because like you've met people throughout the game. You could even include Linebeck if you find some treasure he wants, and he could trade you for it. And they just don't do that. So I think it's a missed opportunity. The four groups of people that are on the traveling ships are neat, or have serial killer vibes. Because like you've got the serial killer vibe guy, you've got the fake Link hero, you've got the Ho-Ho tribe, and I forget who the last one is. But it's like you just have a handful of people, and they had other characters they could have done stuff with, and they did not.
I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to revisit any of this before I beat the game. I feel like just on principle, I probably should, but knowing that the end reward is not something that's going to meaningfully impact my gameplay experience is kind of putting me off from it a little bit.
I mean, so the I don't know if you want to know the reward, but
I know what the reward is. Yeah.
Okay, it's the Great Spin Attack.
Yeah.
So, which especially in this kind of, I would say. I'll say like from 2000 to 2010, they really liked the idea of giving you like a crazy spin attack. And it is not practical ever. It's always just a goofy thing that you have that doesn't really have a great use case. Or like if you're really lucky, there's like that one room full of choo-choos and you can like wipe them all out at once or something with it.
And then you get that good like dopamine rush after having successfully done that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I've probably used it in the Wind Waker, like in the Savage Labyrinth. But generally speaking, it's not very useful. And here I would say it's not very useful. I tried to take a video of it, and every time I tried it, I ended up falling in the water, or I hit a shock chew at one point, and it's like there's just not anything I can think of to use it for. But it didn't take 10 minutes to get either. So
yeah, I completely agree with you. The only time that I can remember a great spin attack actually being pretty fun to use was in A Link Between Worlds, right? I feel like that one was actually pretty powerful, and the only reason that it was is because you can use it in the Tower of Terror or whatever that was called, the Treacherous Tower, right? Mm-hmm. And it can do exactly what you're talking about, Josh, which is like
push everyone off the edge.
Yeah, I'm going to clear an entire room of enemies in half a second, real quick. Don't mind if I do. And that can be a pretty good time. But yeah, it's one of those things that always sounds awesome, and in practice it's just not the best. But yeah. Any more bloopy trails from you, Josh?
I think that's it. I did overlook one mini game. I went to Maze Island also, but I also lost at that mini game. So did not have very good mini game luck.
Which mini game is that?
I guess you haven't been there yet.
So it's literally a maze where you have to go find the things in the maze.
Gotcha. Well, Matt's right. Haven't done that yet. Matt, how about you? Bloopy trail situation for the week.
Yeah, I did a lot of the same stuff Josh did. I went to Maze Island and I beat the first 2 encounters of that, but not the third. I did DS Island after I was able to actually do something there, so I won that minigame and got the big bomb chew bag. What else? I went to, I did quite a bit of exploring. I tried the fishing game as well, did it one time and said, nah, I'm good. Fought Jolene again. I did some more treasure hunting just to hopefully find some sand hourglass. And instead I got 4 ship parts in a row that were horrible and just said, no, I'm good.
Yep. Feels great every time.
Every time. I went back to Frost Island and revisited our Ukes that we genocided, who apparently just shrugged off the genocide and said, nah, I'm good, who all apologized for trying to eat me. So that was fun.
They're fine now, Matt. They're fine.
They are fine. I got a ton of rupees. Like I found a 300 rupee piece, 200 rupee pieces, a couple 100 big rupees. So I actually have max rupees right now. which is kind of cool. I don't know what to do with them. I bought a heart container from one of the shop vendors who was not Beetle.
Definitely not Beetle.
No, not even that guy. There was like just a regular shop vendor who just had
cool.
one. So I bought it from her. Yeah, I still haven't run into Helmet Head Beetle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know why, but I think he only is in the Northwest maybe, and I just haven't been over there in a while. I did the mermaid quest, so I got her to shack up with the old man, which still just feels weird. Don't like that. Yeah, I don't know. That was. I got up to quite a few things. Spent quite a bit of time palling around the sea and trying to find islands that I hadn't previously uncovered, and had a good time.
Didn't do much from my end of things. It was mostly just very disappointing salvage minigames. And then I did make it to DS Island as well. And I'm curious to hear that you weren't actually able to do the minigame, Josh, because as far as I remember, I don't think I had to do anything special to be able to do that. And so I'm curious maybe what's keeping you from being able to play it.
I think you have to get the letter from Gongaron to tell you that he's there. In order to, so if you haven't gotten a letter from the weird, creepy Cupid boy, I don't know that you may not be able to do that yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely did not get that.
Okay, cool. That's probably it then. I actually really enjoyed the Gongaron spinning minigame. I thought that it was so. I think I'm trying to remember. I said that I really liked the cannon target minigame, and you thought that it was a pretty fun one. And then the shooting gallery, I also thought was a really great time. I think that the Gongaron spinning minigame is another pretty fun one that I actually had a good amount, spent a good amount of time on and had a good amount of fun with. I had to play it several times in order to get to that, break that 35-second record that they're trying to push you towards. Because I started off just being very cautious with it. And then after kind of like learning some of the angles and the positioning of some of those little tokens, I was able to kind of speed up my time. And it was fun. It really was. I'm kind of curious if you get any substantially better rewards for beating your time and setting new records after you get that bomb chew bag upgrade. Because if you do, then I would definitely be willing to go back and spend some more time with it. I think I'm more likely next week to go back to the shooting gallery and to try and beat that, because I didn't the first time around after playing it several times. But I think that I would be a little bit more comfortable with it now, having used the bow a good amount more. So I'll probably try that sometime between this week and next week. But that was really mostly it. I didn't do too much extra this week, and think that I'm probably going to try and remedy that before we go into the next episode. Maybe clear out at the very least the trading quest just to meet some of these characters, because I do think that can be a fun reward in and of itself. So I'm gonna do that. I think that that's going to be a good thing for me to do. But let's go ahead and move on into part 5, which is Z-targeting, where we lock on to fascinating characters or enemies that we happen to cross. Matt, I'm going to send it to you first.
I'm going with Max the Knight, just for the simple fact that he shares a name with our good friend, Maximum Nichols. No other reason. Max, you now are a Z-targeting pick, and you have a pyramid in which your eternal soul will rest.
Boom. There you go.
Congratulations.
Good on you, Max. Nice crypt. Great crypt you got there.
Very good crypt. 10 out of 10. Would visit again.
How about you, Josh?
I was actually going to say Max. I will go ahead and just go with the Man of Smiles, who, like we said, has kind of creepy serial killer vibes. But he gives you stuff. Every time you come back in, he gives you stuff. And he always smiles at you. So if you need a smile, just go kill the monsters that for some reason just keep re-inhabiting his ship over and over and over again. And he will continue to give you little cards that you can put in post boxes for prizes.
All right. Definitely got to go visit the possible murderer, who is the Man of Smiles. Looking forward to that now. My Z-targeting for the week is going to be, Matt actually kind of stole this from me a little bit already. I was going to do just the 4 Knights of Kabul in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think that these are fun little characters. Not a whole lot of personality to any of them. I really like their designs and like the art of them. I think that they look pretty unique, and enjoyed them for that reason. But mostly, I just appreciate any departed spirit who is willing to leave the comfortable embrace of the great beyond to assist us in worldly matters for a minute, Like, thanks, good on you. That's very polite. I'm sure whatever you were doing in eternity was more fun than this. But do appreciate you stepping down and giving a mortal a hand with a problem this week. So yeah, the 4 Knights of Cobble are gonna be it for me. Well, with that, let's move into part 6, which is our final thoughts, where we let Matt wrap up this section of the game in as succinct a way as he can think to do. Matt, take it away.
So we enter this section of game revisiting our absolute least favorite part of every chapter in this series, with the Temple of the Ocean King. Even with some new enemies and some new puzzles, it still is just horrible. Moving on into the northeastern part of the sea, where we open up 2 new islands for our main exploration. We get to meet the 4 knights of the ancient kingdom of Cobble, and learn from them about their ancient civilization that is no longer around, and the housing of the Aquanine as their sacred treasure, which they're more than willing to offer up if we can help them get rid of their little problem. On the Isle of the Dead, we have some interesting puzzles and cool mechanics. Get the Regal Medallion, move on over to the Isle of Ruin, where we dive into a pre-dungeon, dungeon-like experience, navigating the island with some cool water mechanics and mazes to traverse into a really excellent dungeon that continues the vibe and atmosphere of a maze or a labyrinth that we have to traverse. Get the excellent item in the hammer, which is truly just a fairy's murder machine, which is really fun to use. Topping it all off with not a great boss fight, but not a bad boss fight by any stretch of the means. And grab ourselves the Aquanine from our really chill and very helpful Ghost King Muto, so that we can head on to the blacksmith next episode and craft our sword, which can defeat Bellum.
Well done, as always, Matt. That brings us to the end of the Sacred Realms Rundown. We will return to the Sacred Realms Rundown one final time in this season next week, covering the finale of the game. Been a fun episode for sure. Josh, I'm curious, now that you have Phantom Hourglass in the rear view, what are you moving on to next?
So I've already started playing Oracle of Ages.
Nice.
I am already about half done with it. No, so I'm going to play this Oracle games. I'm still playing Tears of the Kingdom, just kind of slowed down the pace I'm going through it. But otherwise, I've just kind of been jumping between a bunch of games lately.
So
I'm not really sticking with a whole lot.
Yeah, I'm still chipping away at Tears myself. Matt, I just beat the Lightning Temple last night, so I now have all 4 of the regional phenomena done. Phenomena. I've got those done, and I'm ready to kind of move on and kind of start chipping away at some of the end story. But Lightning Temple was a ton of fun. I thought it was actually really funny that I found myself in 2 pyramid crypt temples in 2 separate Zelda games this week.
Yeah.
Which had very similar vibes, and I kind of enjoyed for very similar reasons. So that was neat. But yeah, definitely. I've been trying to take my time with Tears of the Kingdom, and I would say I'm probably still a few weeks away from actually beating it because, I've still got like 50 shrines and a whole bunch of stuff. I have 2 labyrinths to visit that I haven't been to. I've got a few side quests that I know are supposed to be pretty good. Like I need to go finish the mayoral election in Hateno Village, and I think there's a thing with the school, and I've got to do some stuff still. So
I haven't done any of that stuff either. Hateno Village stuff. I've got like 50 quests in my log. I'm just like, what do I do now?
It's like I want to. I just, there's a lot of things that are competing for my attention in that game at the moment. So I'll get to it is where I'm at with that right now.
Yeah. I don't want to go into detail. I don't want to spoil anyone that maybe hasn't done it. Like the Lightning Temple is easily my favorite in that game. Like that's it. That's already in like my top 10 Zelda dungeons. But I was very, very happy with it. I guess, wow, it was a while back now. An episode I was on in a previous season, I mentioned wanting some mechanics back in a future Zelda game and theorized how they could do it in a game like Breath of the Wild. And they came very close to doing what I said they were going to do.
Okay.
So I was very happy.
Very interesting. And I can't wait to maybe have you on the show again in the very far future. We'll have you sooner than that. But whenever we do cover Tears of the Kingdom, I hope that we all remember that we talked about this. And then you can tell me specifically what that was.
It's like one of my favorite mechanics that they did in Zelda. And I was very upset that it was not in Zelda anymore.
Okay. Well, there you go. We'll all just be on pins and needles wondering exactly what that was. But glad we're all still having a good time with Tears of the Kingdom, except, of course, for Matt, who has beaten the game. So
I have. And man, it was so wonderful. And I'm probably going to. I still play around in it every once in a while. Just log on, make some cool new death machine, run over some people. Yeah, just have fun.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, why not?
It's so fun. Yeah.
I'll be getting all the Koroks, so I'll be playing for
Josh.
Yikes.
Oh,
Good
Josh.
for you.
I'm gonna fight the final boss sometime. I've been saying it for like over a month now, and I just haven't done it. So maybe by the end of September, I will have fought the final boss. But I gotta 100% it once.
Well, if you haven't beaten Ganon with 900 whatever Korok seeds, have you really beaten him? That's the question I have. How you feel about that, Matt?
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
I said if you've beaten Ganon without all 900 Korok seeds, have you really beaten him?
Yes. Fully. 100%. I have no intention of ever getting even close to 900 Korok seeds on either game, even collectively, even between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Never even close.
As always, I appreciate your unflinching honesty.
That's what I'm here for.
One of the things we keep you around for. Well, Josh, again, been great having you on the show. And, whenever we figure out what the next game we're playing is, we will start making arrangements to have the recurring cast of guests back on, figure out when we're going to have everybody back in here. In the meantime, would you like to do that whole thing where you let everybody know where they can follow you?
So I go by Watcher Joshua, and you can currently find me on a multitude of platforms. You can find me on Instagram and on Threads and on Blue Sky and on Mastodon. But Watcher Joshua.
Wonderful.
Or at ZeldaUniverse.net, of course.
Which we always like to remind our listeners to keep it locked to for a variety of excellent Zelda resources. It's a wonderful little site. With forums, guides, everything that you need if you want to be a very online fan of Zelda games. So definitely keep it locked.
Yeah, all the Phantom Hourglass guides that I forgot I wrote.
But I'm sure they're great. I'm sure that you did a fantastic job. Anyway, with all that being said, Josh, we will catch up with you sooner rather than later. Matt, I think it's time to get out of here for the week. I'm ready to fast forward to next week, at which time we will see what the early results of the poll are showing.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well. It's going to be an interesting one for sure. We only have 2 games, so it's one or the other. There's no ranking here. It's going to be fun.
We'll see. We'll be waiting with bated breath. If you enjoyed today's show and would like a little extra Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/sacredrealmspod and become a patron. If you've got no rupees, it is not a problem. 5-star Apple Podcast reviews are a great free way to support us. More reviews means that more people see our show. That makes us very happy Hylians. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sacred Realms Pod for updates on the podcast and for behind-the-scenes action. Sacred Realms will be back next Wednesday with our thoughts on the finale of Phantom Hourglass. We'd love for you to play along with us and to share your thoughts on our social channels. Phantom Hourglass can be played on the Nintendo 2DS or 3DS. It can be played on the Wii U, which is the way that you should not play it. But in the meantime, may your hearts be full, may your arrows never miss. We'll catch y'all next time. Sacred Realms is an independent, listener-supported podcast, which is produced, edited, and mixed by me, Lyndon Willoughby. Business operations are handled by Matt Willoughby. Our music is generously provided by Darknuck and is available to listen to on Spotify. Finally, we'd like to thank Nintendo for continuing to create such exceptional and innovative experiences.